The warm Friday afternoon in Pasadena was nearing its end, the sun sinking low behind the mountains, casting long, soft shadows across the peaceful streets. Elijah Carter, a 41-year-old entrepreneur, was finishing another hectic week. But today wasn't about corporate meetings or financial jargon. Today, he was simply picking up some documents from one of his branches. A straightforward task, or so he thought. Dressed casually in a pair of jeans and a plain hoodie, Elijah strolled into the branch office of Western Gateway Bank, one of the 25 locations he owned. The branch hummed with activity, the quiet murmur of customers chatting, the click-clack of keyboards, and the whirring of a printer in the background. Elijah greeted the security guard with a quick nod, his eyes sweeping over the familiar layout of the office. At the back, he spotted the manager on duty, a sharp-faced woman named Allison Parker. With her tailored blazer and commanding presence, she seemed completely absorbed in a conversation with another employee. Elijah made his way to the counter, where a young teller was working, and politely requested the notarized documents he had left for safekeeping. Before the teller could respond, Allison noticed him. Her heels clicked sharply against the floor as she marched over to him. Her gaze was unwavering, sharp, and just a little too intense. "Can I help you with something?" Her voice was clipped, her words sharp, as if his very presence was an inconvenience. Elijah maintained his composure, offering a polite smile. "Yes, I'm here to pick up some documents I left last Tuesday." Allison didn't soften. She crossed her arms and looked him up and down, her voice laced with suspicion. "I don't recall seeing you here before. Do you even have an account with us?" Her tone wasn't just dismissive. It was calculated, meant to undermine him. The customers behind Elijah shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension in the air. But Elijah didn't flinch. He simply answered, his voice steady. "I do. In fact, I've been banking here for years." But Allison wasn't finished. She waved her hand dismissively toward the teller. "I'll take it from here, sir. If you're looking for basic services, you might want to visit one of the larger branches. This location primarily serves our higher-tier clientele." Her words, dripping with condescension, felt like an attack. Something about her tone suggested that her assumptions about him were based entirely on his appearance, and Elijah wasn't about to let that slide. He kept his gaze steady, not letting the sting of her words break his calm. "I understand, but my documents should already be here. If you could just check under the name Elijah Carter, that would save us all some time." Allison raised an eyebrow, her posture stiffening. "Elijah Carter," she repeated, her disbelief evident. "We don't normally hold documents for customers unless they have premium accounts. Are you sure you're at the right branch?" The room fell into an uneasy silence. Customers began to notice the exchange, and even the tellers paused in their work. Elijah saw the way Allison's eyes flicked over his casual hoodie and jeans. She pressed her lips together in irritation. "I'm quite certain," Elijah replied, his voice smooth. "This is the branch I've used for years." Allison let out a short, humorless laugh before turning to the teller. "Check for his name, but I highly doubt we have anything here. We're not a storage facility for misplaced paperwork." The teller hesitated, clearly uncomfortable, but reluctantly began typing into the system. Meanwhile, Allison leaned in closer, lowering her voice in a way that was meant to be private but still carried an unmistakable edge. "Look, sir," she said, her words dripping with condescension. "We have policies in place for a reason. If you're not in the right account bracket, there's no way we can accommodate special requests like this. Maybe next time, consider upgrading your status before coming in." The heat of several gazes fell on him. Elijah felt the pressure building but refused to let her words rattle him. He folded his arms, standing tall, and waited. It felt like an eternity before the teller spoke again, her voice barely audible. Actually, Mr. Carter's documents are here. They were marked for secure pickup." Allison's head snapped toward the teller, her face showing a flash of confusion. "What?" she barked. "Yes, they're right here," the teller replied, holding up a folder with Elijah's name clearly labeled on it. For a brief moment, Allison's confident mask faltered. She snatched the folder from the teller, her face flushed, and handed it over with visible reluctance. "There you go," she muttered, her tone tight. Elijah took the folder with a calm smile. "Thank you. And just to clarify," he paused, letting the tension build, "is there a reason this process had to be so complicated?" Allison stiffened, regaining her composure. We have to ensure security and verify credentials, especially when dealing with certain clientele. Her words, meant to justify her behavior, only dug her into a deeper hole. Elijah stood firm, his gaze never wavering. This wasn't just about him. This was about the deeper issue that Allison's behavior represented. Taking a breath, he looked her squarely in the eyes. I appreciate your concern for security, but I can't help but wonder, was this really about verifying credentials, or something else? The question hung in the air, sharp and loaded. Allison's lips tightened. She glanced around, realizing that more and more customers were turning their attention toward the growing tension. Some shifted nervously, others leaned in, sensing that something was about to unfold. Allison straightened her blazer, forcing a stiff smile. Sir, we follow the same protocol for all our customers. There's no need to take this personally. Elijah gave a small nod. I see. Well, since you're so committed to protocol, he said, his voice steady, let me formally introduce myself. With deliberate precision, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek business card. Handing it to her, he watched as her confident demeanor cracked. She hesitated before taking it, her fingers trembling slightly as she read the card. The bold lettering at the top read, Elijah Carter, founder and CEO, Western Gateway Bank. Allison's face drained of color. You're the CEO, she stammered, the words stumbling from her lips. Elijah nodded evenly. Yes. I own this bank, and all the others under its name. The room fell silent, the air thick with disbelief. The tellers, the customers, even the security guards seemed frozen, their eyes darting between Elijah and Allison. Allison opened her mouth, but no words came out. Mr. Carter, I didn't realize, she faltered, her voice barely above a whisper. Elijah raised his hand, stopping her. Exactly. You didn't realize. And that's the problem, he said, his voice firm but calm. I've worked hard to build a company that values every individual, no matter how they look or dress. Respect shouldn't be conditional. Yet here I am, dismissed and condescended to by someone who should know better. The murmurs in the room grew louder, some customers nodding in agreement. Allison, now visibly flustered, tried to salvage the situation. Mr. Carter, I truly apologize if I came across as harsh. It wasn't my intention. But Elijah wasn't finished. He knew this was his moment to teach. Matters of intent are important, he said, stepping forward, his gaze unyielding. But so are actions. And your actions today showed not just a lack of respect but a dangerous assumption about who deserves dignity. His words echoed in the room, drawing the attention of everyone present. The discomfort was palpable. Elijah's voice remained steady, yet the weight of his words was undeniable. You looked at me and decided I wasn't worth your time, he said, his gaze unshaken. That I didn't belong here. His voice lingered in the air, each word carrying more than just frustration. It was the sting of judgment, the kind of judgment that wasn't based on who he was, but on how he appeared. And the way you spoke to me, he continued, that wasn't about policies or protocol. That was about power. Your belief that you could exercise it over someone you assumed had none. Allison opened her mouth, ready to fire back, but the words seemed to wither in her throat. Elijah's statement hit her like a cold gust of wind, leaving her with nothing to say. She glanced around the room, suddenly aware of the audience she had drawn, an audience that was beginning to realize the true weight of what had just transpired. Elijah's words hung in the air, leaving no room for excuses. He had exposed her for what she truly was. Elijah's tone softened, though his message remained sharp. Do you know how many people experience this kind of treatment every day? People who don't have a title or a business card to prove their worth? The question lingered like a challenge, pressing down on the silence that followed. How many walk out of here feeling less than they are because of interactions like this? The room was quiet. Customers shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances. Some nodded in subtle agreement, their expressions telling their own stories of judgment and dismissal. Even the young teller behind the counter seemed to shrink, her cheeks flushed with second-hand embarrassment. Elijah sighed, his gaze sweeping across the room before he spoke again. This isn't just about me, he said. It's about everyone who walks through those doors expecting fair treatment. They shouldn't have to prove their value to receive basic respect. Allison's shoulders slumped, the weight of Elijah's words breaking down the walls she had so carefully built around her authority. She looked down at the card in her hand, her grip faltering. I understand, Mr. Carter, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I truly didn't mean to offend you, or anyone else. Elijah tilted his head slightly, studying her response. I'll take your apology at face value, he said, his tone measured but firm. But understand this, apologies only mean something when they're backed by change. With a purposeful gesture, he turned his attention to the rest of the room. It was time to drive home a lesson, one that would stick with him long after he was gone. His voice, quiet but commanding, filled the space. Moments like this are bigger than one person, Elijah continued, meeting the eyes of the customers around him. They're about how we, as people, choose to treat one another. Whether we respect someone based on who they are, or what we assume about them. He placed the folder on the counter beside him, folding his hands with deliberate calm. I started Western Gateway Bank with a simple philosophy: fairness, transparency, and respect for everyone. No one should walk into a place of business and feel like they're less than anyone else. Not here. Not anywhere. A murmur rippled through the room. Several customers nodded, their expressions softening as they considered his words. A middle-aged man in a weather jacket spoke up, his voice filled with quiet conviction. He's right, the man said. Too many of us get looked at sideways just for the way we're dressed or where we come from. It's time we started doing better. Elijah smiled at the man, a flicker of appreciation crossing his features. It's not just about policies, he continued. It's about mindset. It's about stopping ourselves from making snap judgments that can hurt or demean someone else. He paused for effect, letting his words sink in. And if you're in a position of power, like a branch manager, it's about using that power to lift people up, not push them down. Allison, still rooted in place, was visibly humbled. Her face had drained of its earlier confidence, replaced by a mix of regret and determination. You're absolutely right, Mr. Carter, she said softly. I see that now. I'll do better. Elijah lingered for a moment, his gaze steady. He nodded once, as if satisfied with her admission. I hope you will, he said. Because it's not just me you owe better treatment, it's every person who walks through those doors. His eyes shifted to the young teller who had helped him retrieve his documents. It starts with empowering your team to act with the same fairness and respect that should define this branch. The teller, who had been caught in the crossfire, offered a timid but grateful smile. Her shoulders relaxed, clearly relieved that the attention was no longer on her. Elijah knew, however, that this moment wasn't just about words, it was about leaving a lasting impression, one that would ripple far beyond this room. Turning back to Allison, Elijah's tone softened further, though his words remained firm. I'm not here to fire you or make an example of you, Allison. But I will be watching to see how this branch operates moving forward. He leaned in slightly, his voice carrying the weight of his authority. Respect isn't just a policy, it's a practice. One that needs to be reflected in how you treat every person who walks through that door. Allison nodded slowly, the mix of regret and resolve still visible on her face. I understand, Mr. Carter. Thank you for giving me the chance to improve. I won't let you down. Elijah studied her for a moment longer, before turning his gaze back to the room. To everyone here, he said, raising his voice slightly, thank you for your patience. I hope what happened today serves as a reminder to all of us, not just in this bank, but in life, that respect doesn't come from titles, clothing, or assumptions. It comes from how we choose to see and treat one another. There was a murmur of agreement among the customers, some smiling, others nodding with quiet understanding. An elderly woman near the back of the line raised her hand, her voice soft but clear. It's good to see someone stand up for what's right, she said. Elijah smiled warmly, his gaze softening. Thank you, ma'am, he said, before turning to leave. And remember, we all have the power to stand up for what's right, even in the smallest of moments. With that, he grabbed his folder from the counter and walked toward the door, his demeanor as steady as it had been when he first walked in. As he stepped out into the fading sunlight, Elijah glanced back, catching Allison's eye one last time. She was speaking quietly to her team, her posture no longer rigid, but reflective. Elijah knew this was just the beginning. Change doesn't come all at once, it starts with moments like this. Moments that challenge assumptions, hold others accountable, and plant seeds for something better. He stepped outside, feeling a quiet satisfaction, not from asserting his authority, but from knowing that the seed for change had been planted. This wasn't about revenge or power, it was about creating a moment of reflection that could ripple through the branch and beyond. Elijah believed that the lesson would stay with Allison, her team, and the customers who had witnessed it. The lesson was simple yet profound. Respect isn't about what someone wears, where they're from, or what their title says. It's about how we treat people, not because of who they are, but because of who we are. For everyone watching this story unfold, Elijah's words were a reminder: every interaction is a chance to make someone feel seen, valued, and respected. It costs nothing to offer dignity, but its value is immeasurable. So ask yourself, are you treating people the way you want to be treated? Are you challenging your own assumptions? Are you contributing to a world where respect is given freely and equally? If this story resonated with you, take a moment to reflect, share it with someone who might need the reminder, and subscribe for more stories that inspire change. Because the way we treat others defines who we are and the world we create together.